Everyone, so welcome to the first episode of Teh Tarik with Walid for 2025. I think it's the first episode, and it is episode 103. And today is a slight change of pace. We are going to talk about refugees with an actual refugee, and I think there are still a lot of misconceptions or a lot of things that people actually do not understand, do not know basic things about refugees. So I am delighted to have Ali Reza with me today. He is an Afghan refugee and he is also an author, a writer.
Hello, Professor Walid. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you very well. Thank you so much for doing this. So Ali, maybe let's get to it. Could you share with us your background a little?
Yes, sure thing. So my name is Ali Reza. I'm from Afghanistan. I've become a refugee since 2014 when the situation in Afghanistan was very bad for the background that I belong and I'm coming from. So I belong to Hazara ethnicity, one of the most persecuted and oppressed ethnicities in Afghanistan from different regimes and groups, be it Taliban, which is now governing the government of Afghanistan, in the past from the Democrat government of Afghanistan, and throughout the history from different groups like ISIS and some other insurgency groups, as well as through different kingdoms and governments of Afghanistan. So historically, Hazaras have been under persecution because of their two specific being different from other majority groups in Afghanistan.
Yeah, could you share a
Their
little bit
ethnicity and
what are those differences, Ali? The
yes,
Hazaras, yeah.
yeah, the Hazaras are different from ethnicity of other groups in Afghanistan. That is a concern for Taliban because of their, I don't know, share of power in the government or some other. And then Hazaras belong to the Shia sect of religion, which in Afghanistan is very sensitive because of this. But I think these two major reasons were the bold reasons for those terrorist groups to attack and to target attack specific Hazara people and Shia minorities in Afghanistan.
Okay.
So due to this,
sorry. Yeah, the persecution is because of different ethnicity and also because you are Shias and it's a different sect within Islam. Am I right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Oh, that's really unfortunate because I was reading up a little bit on this and it seems like the persecution has gone on for many, many years, like hundreds of years, or uh, there's even been a genocide before? There's a Hazara genocide before?
Hazaras has been systematically under oppression, target killing, and genocide throughout the history. 60% of Hazara's population has been massacred throughout the history and the time of Abdurrahman Khan kingdom. And that was the biggest tragedy for Hazaras. And then throughout the history, this has continued in different ways. That genocide is still continuing. In the few past years, there has been massive attacks on Hazara communities that tens of hundreds of people throughout different attacks have been killed. The Hazara communities have been targeted in their learning communities, and their schools, and their hospitals, maternity hospital. A lot of kids, newborn children have been killed. And these are only small part of the records that I'm talking about, but this has been quite huge and bigger numbers throughout the time. So these reasons have forced people who are coming from my background, mainly Hazaras, but then there are also some other minority groups who also run from the country. So we cannot live in Afghanistan in peaceful situation. That's the main and biggest reason for why we leave the country. And now that Taliban hold the power, I think that's 100% of impossible living peacefully in Afghanistan.
So, a couple of questions. So, one is, which region of Afghanistan do Hazaras primarily reside in? Or is it throughout? Is it scattered throughout Afghanistan? And second thing, did it get better after the Taliban were toppled the first time round, before they came to power last couple of years?
Yeah, so Hazaras are scattered throughout Afghanistan geographically, but there are main provinces. Usually the central provinces in Afghanistan are the places where most of the Hazaras reside and originate from. But throughout the history in the past, I'm saying again, because of this systemic persecution, so Hazaras mass migrated from their origin lands and different provinces, and then they have been going to places that there are bigger populations of them, and then they reside in those places. And now on the map, it is usually seen and known as the central provinces and parts of Afghanistan are most populated by Hazaras. But it's really scattered throughout the north, south, central, and east and west as well.
So, did it get better before this? Before the
I'm
Taliban
sorry,
came to
Professor,
power?
your sound is breaking and I really don't have
Oh,
your pictures. Is it my connection or yours?
oh, sorry,
So
sorry. Can you hear me
if you
now?
can repeat.
Can
Yes.
yeah. So, did it get better after the Taliban were toppled the first time round?
For Afghanistan overall or for Hazaras
No,
in
for Hazaras,
Afghanistan? That's
not for
two
Afghanistan.
different things.
For
Yeah,
Hazaras.
for Hazaras, if the number of killing has reduced a little bit based on the data, which we really don't and cannot rely on data because nowadays there's no news agency and everything is being very much of censored. But if they claim it, is only because they have direct operation now on Hazaras. So the very last thing that happens is Hazaras are being killed, but then nobody knows about it. So I don't think if I can answer that very much based on the statistics, but based on the news and information that we receive from our friends, families, relatives, and people that still live in Afghanistan, but sometimes through some other channelings, they put the information. A lot of such operations are going on. For example, the Taliban are forcing Hazaras to give up their lands and properties to Taliban, and if they resist, they are being killed instantly. That's so much of a concern, and people cannot really now resist because the Taliban are the government, and they can use any means to get what they want.
Okay, so when the Taliban was not in power, who were the ones doing the oppressing? Is it the government also, or is it ordinary people?
When the Taliban did not have the power, but they had the control over specific places. We go with a simple search on Google, even during the time that the Afghan government, Afghanistan was governed by this presidents, Hamid Karzai or Ashraf Ghani. So they could not really govern the whole country with dominant security. So some parts, some provinces and some cities were governed by the Taliban, even on that time. But again, when there were on those places that were war zones, if there were a priority for protection, the government would never look at the communities that Hazaras reside. And this has been proven and recorded throughout the history. Even in the capital city in Kabul, usually the communities that Hazaras reside, they are being targeted. And then the government keep ignoring the security situation there, and then it keeps happening and happening and happening. So yeah, the government was intentionally neglecting their duty to protect the citizens, all citizens of Afghanistan. So they were not really doing it for Hazaras. So in the past, when there were also other groups, not only Taliban, but ISIS as well, and few other, to only target Hazaras and Shias in Afghanistan. So we really cannot say that if Afghanistan was governed by the president throughout the 20 years of US invasion in Afghanistan, or after that now the Taliban are governing. So in both eras, I mean, Hazaras were being persecuted and killed, and yeah, no specific measurements to control.
It didn't really matter because that was the constant. So what's the proportion of Hazaras and Shias in Afghanistan?
Well, I don't think if there is a specific statistics and data that can really go through all regions and count that. But what they put on the data is Hazaras are counted as minorities. I believe many of the Hazaras don't believe it, especially those who always think that the data is not. So, but it's usually they are Hazaras are considered as 20%, less or more of the population. I can't be really giving that data because I'm not sure of, but it's counted as minorities compared to other population.
Okay. So, and it's not uncommon, right? A lot of places in the world where, especially in conflict zones, the number of minorities officially is underreported and underestimated. So thank you for
That's
that.
right.
So if we could go to your personal story, you said you became a refugee in 2014?
Yes, and that was when I was very young, and the situation got very tough for me. So I sought asylum through countries that I reached to Indonesia. Then since 2014 until now, that is 2025, I've been living as a refugee in Indonesia.
Okay. How did you seek asylum? How did you get over to Indonesia?
So if generally thinking and speaking, usually the asylum seekers, when they get into situations of being forced to leave their countries, they would look at the most possible option there. And at that time, when it was for me and many other people who could leave the country on that time, maybe that was the only route to take. So I ended up in Indonesia after going through some countries, but this was all kind of set and advised and decided by the usually the agencies or travel smuggling people who promised the country that you are being taken is going to be safer than Afghanistan and safer than the situation people are facing in Afghanistan, which it turns out to be like that, but not as it has to be. And I'm saying that because when I, together with many other asylum seekers on that time or after that or before that, end up to Indonesia. Indonesia is not a country that is accepting refugees as their responsibility. That is to say that the Indonesian government did not sign and is not a signatory of the Refugee Convention, so they cannot accept asylum seekers and refugees as permanent residents. And that means there are not laws supporting existence of refugees in this land to provide them with livelihoods, formal education, formal employment, or every other right that a human being should have. In the early days, asylum seekers are being detained in detention center until there is a decision on whether they are refugees or they are eligible to be given asylum to or not. And then after that process moves on with the certification of refugee identity, then again the situation is very much the same. So they are allowed to live in the country of Indonesia, but they are not allowed to study formally, to work formally and officially, or they are not allowed to do anything that other citizens may do as residents of the country. So refugees in Indonesia are usually kept in detention center, but after the presidential regulation announced that refugees can be living in urban areas, so they are taken from detention centers, but again, given the permission to live in accommodations or community houses that are still controlled and supervised, and they have very much of limitation on their freedom of movement and all the things that I said about living as a free human.
So you live in community housing now, Ali Reza?
Yes, we are living in the accommodations that are provided by the International Organization for Migration, IOM, and that is being supervised and regulated and monitored by the Immigration Office of Indonesia. So refugees are being given that accommodation to stay in, but then there are rules and regulations to follow.
So we'll get to what those rules and regulations are. So you are not allowed to, as a refugee, because Indonesia is not a signatory to that convention. So you are not allowed to work or study officially there. Then how do you survive?
That's a big question for everyone. And that was my biggest question when I entered this country. And I was trying to see what's going on, how to continue surviving and then living. And that is still a question. How would refugees survive and live if they are not allowed to work?
Yeah.
So basically, refugees in Indonesia are of two big groups. They are into two categories, if I can be giving a picture to those who are listening to us. So the first group is those who arrived in Indonesia and they were either reported or self-reported or submitted themselves to the detention centers. That is, I go in that category, that we were detained. So I spent 5 years of my life in detention center. And detention center, if I can give you a clear understanding, is exactly the same as prison. So refugees are being kept in detention centers. Also, let's call it as prison, because they are not allowed to get out of those detention centers, and everything that is needed for them, that will be provided. But that is of very much of specific things like food, and that place, which is called detention, counted as shelter, as well as if medical service need be. Then the other category is those refugees and asylum seekers who are not accepted, or the capacity for the detention centers were full, and the detention centers and camps were refusing to accept them, and they had no other way just to find themselves a place to rent and then stay there, and anywhere that was the cheapest place for them to live. Initially, the state of refugees should be as transit. The status should be as transit for refugees in countries like Indonesia. But this transit has become so much long, and it has become 10 years, 12 years, for some people 15 years, that they are living in this situation. So, and how they survive with the renting of their places or the livelihood means is only relying and depending either on charity organizations, on maybe people or those humanitarian organizations that they can assist them, or relying to a family member who is still live in Afghanistan or other country that can a little bit support them. Other than that, they are not allowed to work or make a living to survive by themselves.
Wow, I think thank you so much. I mean, this is just is an incredibly saddening story, and I think a lot of people do not know that refugees in some countries are not allowed to work and not allowed to integrate in society, right? It's almost exactly as you said, right? It's your second class citizens. That's one thing. This is not even second class. This is fourth class, fifth class citizens. It's almost like prisoners in some cases. Can we backtrack a little? How old are you now, Ali?
Yes, I'm 25 years old now.
So you left when you were 14.
15.
You're 15. And how did you get to Indonesia? You said because you had to pay the smuggling people, or
Yeah. Yeah, so usually people are being grouped together and then they are given direction to go through. And that is usually people like me and most other people get to their destination. And the destination and the route is being set by people who arrange this.
Okay. And you took the boat.
Yeah, so from Malaysia to Indonesia, on that time, the only way for us to be passing through was taking the boat. Yeah, and a lot of people have this very terrible experience of getting on the boat and then passing through the sea and getting to Indonesia.
So you took the flight from Afghanistan to Malaysia and then the boat from Malaysia to...
It is from Afghanistan to India and then India to Malaysia and Malaysia by boat to Indonesia.
Yes. So I've read stories about people dying on the boat. Is that common? Did you see anything of that, or did you hear anything?
I didn't see it by myself and literally about someone dying in our group, in our boat. No, but I have heard a lot of stories. Maybe this one from Malaysia to Indonesia is not that long distance, but it may happen, or it has happened. It might have happened. There are children, there are women, there are elderly who may not be able to make it through, and that's a very difficult situation. It's stormy sometimes. There's so much of heavy rain, and it happens. Yeah.
How big is the boat, and how many people are there?
It's not really a big one. It's a boat for the size of, let's say, 8 to 10 people, but it usually is overcrowded, and that's the main reason for if a boat is sinking or any terrible thing happen. So on the boat that we were in was more than the capacity, let's say around 30 to 40, and that was fully overcrowded. Maybe that is the reason when a lot of tragedies happen.
Okay, thank you. Did you live with your family or did you live alone?
No, I'm living on my alone by myself.
So when you left Afghanistan, it was by yourself or?
That's right.
Family? Oh, by yourself. So your family
Yes.
is still in Afghanistan?
My family could not stay in Afghanistan after the Taliban take over. But yeah, after I left, they were still in Afghanistan. So I'm saying when it comes for people, the very tough situations that they have to decide whether to stay in their country and to be killed or to run away to wherever they don't know. So people take the option of saving their lives.
Yeah. So where are your family? Where's your family at now? You said they left Afghanistan.
So after the Taliban take over, when it was impossible for them to stay anywhere in Afghanistan, so they had to be going to the neighboring country, Iran. And then there is still also, there are many problems, maybe worse than in Indonesia. So in that country, because Iran and Pakistan, which are the neighboring countries to Afghanistan, are very much receiving millions of asylum seekers and refugees, and they're also not a signatory of refugee convention. So they're not hosting well the refugees.
That was gonna be my question as well. So it seems like Iran would be a natural place, not just because it borders Afghanistan, but it's also a predominantly Shia country. So do a lot of your people go to Iran as refugees?
Yeah, there are a lot of, so it's a neighboring country. There are many reasons for why people flee to Iran. One is because of the same language we speak.
Right.
So that's easier to integrate. That's easier to find their ways. Another one is because they're also Shia Muslim, and a lot of people find it easier to survive culturally or religiously. And then some other people see Iran as passing by route to other country, maybe to Turkey or to the way to Europe. Many other people only migrate and go to Iran because of just to survive, and it's easier to survive compared to, let's say, Pakistan, because they speak different language. So it's so much of what and how people can survive and find their ways. But then it has been millions, and the current government of Iran is not welcoming asylum seekers and refugees, knowing that Taliban government are not protecting their citizens, especially Hazaras, and also knowing that the Hazaras are Shia Muslims and they're not safe in Afghanistan under Taliban governance, but still they keep deporting and they keep forcing asylum seekers in Iran to go back to Afghanistan.
Why is that? Why are they not helping?
Well, for them, it's a lot of reasons. So throughout the history, for the very past 50, 40 years, Iran has always been hosting asylum seekers and refugees. But then recently, so that's sometimes always also a push factor for Iran, that if they want to kind of have a pressure on international community, they use refugees and asylum seekers as a leverage. Another reason is simply because they claim that we do not have enough space, or these asylum seekers are stealing our jobs, or many other reasons, and a lot of xenophobic reasons included in this reason. So they are pushing back the asylum seekers going back to Afghanistan, and this is also against the international and humanitarian law, that people being sent back to their countries that are not safe is not a good practice for the government, but they are doing it.
Thank you, Ali. So there's a question from Arun. How common is it for families to be separated during either the movement through countries or during the detention? And from your own experience, it seems like it's pretty common.
It's pretty common. It happens first in the country of origin. People like me who face a situation of difficulties, so they have to make their very first decision. A lot of people get separated in their country of origin. Many people get separated on the way. We have had people who have been separated on the Malaysia-Indonesia border, and then after some years, they got together because they were forced to stay in Malaysia, and then the other part of the family could pass through, and they got into Indonesia, and then after some years, the other members of the family could come to Indonesia again. And then when it comes to detention, that's also when people are in detention for different reasons, they're being separated. I've been in detention center, and there have been cases that children were separated from their parents, or husband was separated from their wife and children for different reasons that the immigration detention centers set. And that is not for a short time. That can sometimes become months or years. And then there are also, at the very last stage, there are some conditions that some families are being separated because of different rules of the countries that they resettle the refugees. So some members of the family get the chance to resettle to a third country, but few others do not. And then there is this Australia resettlement rule for Indonesia only, that people coming to Indonesia as asylum seeker after July 2014 are not eligible to be resettled in Australia. Well, there have been a lot of people whose parents, whose siblings, whose family members came before this law was set few months before, and then few of their family members came after this law, and then they're being separated forever, which is a very cruel policy and is separating families purposefully. And there's no consideration for families who are being separated.
Thank you for that. I mean, it's pretty depressing hearing what you have said. How do you speak Bahasa, Ali?
I wish I could fluently, but no. Aku masih belajar,
Okay.
tapi belum lancar.
Okay.
So I'm very much struggling with bahasa Indonesia.
But you can get by.
Yeah.
Sikit-sikit boleh. Yeah. Okay.
I can find my way in the society. So if I get to go and make friends, it's for local languages.
That's the reason I asked. I wanted to know what's the level of integration with society. Are you allowed even to integrate? Which part of Indonesia are you at now, by the way?
I'm in Jakarta and Bekasi area.
Are you able to? What is the level of integration basically?
Well, I have very much of different experience with a lot of other refugees. So for me, being in a detention center very far from the capital city, so I had to experience my time in different cities. So I was transferred from one detention center to another detention center, and that added up to my experience of seeing around how refugees in different cities are surviving. So the level of integration in Indonesia for refugees is zero because there is no ground for integration. But to the point that people get to know a little bit of the language, get to know how the survival goes on, get to know some Indonesian and get some opportunity to make friendships. This is all going through the human connection. There is no set of rules and regulation that can encourage asylum seekers and refugees for better integration. That is started with the difficult rules of detention. Detention itself means a big no to integration, yeah? So that is isolating and keeping people in solitary and not letting them exposed to the society. And then after the presidential regulation came that, okay, now refugees can live in the urban settings, still the mechanism is that the accommodations that IOM provide for refugees is very much in isolated areas and with regulations. Some of those regulations could really hinder refugees from their very first days, and they have been traumatized with them, is the biggest reason why people like me could not learn Bahasa Indonesia well. Otherwise, 10 years living in a country and you can't speak it very well is such a huge shame, yeah? Another thing is, throughout the time of detention and later on by the law, we have always been reminded that we are not here for a long time, so integration is not a need. And then the other biggest warnings were directly to refugees by, even if that is not in the law or in the regulation, because there are a lot of gaps in the system that people really don't know. Even the system doesn't know, okay, what can be done best here. So it's really based on people's decision or people in charge decisions. So they kind of specifically were warning refugees not to get along with local communities, not to get into the gatherings of local communities, or not to kind of get involved in formal or official things if it is not supported by the system. So a lot of those reasons and these things could be something to hinder refugees to integrate. And I don't think if the system is very much of encouraging to integration.
So there are some locals who may employ refugees, but that's illegal. But they may get refugees to do some odd jobs here and there.
I'm so sorry, I missed your question.
So there are some locals who employ refugees, even though it's not allowed, but they just do it anyway because the regulations are unclear, or
I don't have experience of that, or I have not heard of locals employing refugees. But if such a thing happens, I don't think the employment is because of the financial, but it is because of skill learning or because of sharing experiences or those kind of things. And yes, that may happen people to people, no government or no organizations involved.
Right. So there's another question by Arun. So how are you treated by the local population, considering that Indonesia is also a Sunni majority country as well, and there are different ethnicity, different language. How are you, and you are a refugee, how are you treated by ordinary Indonesians?
Yeah, I can say on the contrary, now that the state does not have set of rules and regulation to be supportive to refugees for integration, but local Indonesians, the society is very much good with refugees. Throughout my time of stay in Indonesia, me coming from a Shia sect of religion, I have never faced such a problem, and I have a lot of very, very good and supportive Indonesian friends. That is to say, it's always different when people see that there is harmony, there is everything good enough, so they are supportive to one another. They don't see refugees as threats, they don't see refugees as different people, but it is the system that is not supportive. The local people are really good, and in Indonesia, because of this very good system of tolerance for the vast diversity that they have, having a different religion in here is not really a problem. So I can't, based on my personal experience, I can't complain on any point about this. So local people are very good to me.
Indonesians are very generous people.
They are very generous, and they are very warm and friendly.
Indeed, indeed. So what do you do on a day-to-day basis? How does your daily routine go?
Thank you for this question. So people like me who always think that regardless of the situation, I'm coming from a very difficult background, from a very much of situation throughout my life from the very childhood. I had to be struggling to survive. So survival has become something in our nature to have it everywhere. So really, when I was in detention center, we were taking our time not to only survive, to be thinking of, okay, how we can live in detention. And, you know, with living, we should make things happen. We were having children in detention centers. And I was thinking, like, if I was that child and knowing nothing about anything, how would I feel? Then we were trying to make some playgrounds and to play with the children. There were some adults there as well, the families as well. We were trying to get ourselves into positions that we become part of their families, because we knew it very well that we are all alone. And those families are also coming from such backgrounds of seeking asylum, passing all those hardships. Now that everybody is trapped in detention center, how are we making this survival into a living mode? And how are we living in harmony? We were really taking our time to make it, and we made it. So after some time in detention center, we had some playgrounds, we had some classrooms. The way I'm talking and trying to give you the picture is very beautiful. It's like a very colorful thing, but it is detention, it is prison.
Right.
Inside prison, we were making this. There were very high walls. There were the wires on the walls, so people do not run away. And there were security guards on the towers. It's really the prison. But people inside the detention, they knew that they had to survive, and they knew that they had to make that happen to live. And then after I was released from detention, I was like, wow, this is a little bit better than detention. What can we do now? So I was getting along with my friends. Throughout the time, I've always been self-learning with books, newspapers, or everything that I could get. After some time, I could get a phone and then a laptop. So throughout these years, we have been trying to kind of self-educate ourselves and peer educate ourselves. We had friends who had very much good skills of drawing and painting. We were trying to learn from one another. We had some friends who were very good with English. Now I can speak English just like they.
I was going to ask, where did you learn that? Where did you learn that, since you couldn't go to school?
Yeah, well, for us, even in Afghanistan, there was not always this. The word school doesn't interpret or translate to us like the school that people like in Singapore, let's say, they go to. So I have been, when I was a child, I have been learning and going to school. My school was a tent, so it was not really a nice building to go, and then there were good teachers. We had a tent, 3 tents in our town, and then we were going to that to be called a school, and there were local people who were just assigned as teachers. This is because our school was destroyed for the war. And then when I was growing up, living in those situations, so learning was always part of everyday thing for us, and we really didn't summon it up to a physical school. We knowing that, we don't really get it, let's find other alternatives to learn. And then by the time, as soon as we get to learn something, we have to be ready to pass it to next generation. And as I said, children in detention. Now, some of those children from detention who got the opportunity to go to other countries are learning in formal schools in the US and Australia and the UK. And they are very much good at their school, only because when they were children, they could start with alphabets, English alphabets. And after sometimes they could get better with that. It is same for all refugee population, not only in Indonesia, I suppose, throughout the Southeast Asia or many other countries. So people find their ways to learn. We don't say this is a good thing or this is enough. No, this is the worst. But we have to be taking and finding ways to self-educate ourselves and to peer educate the community.
Thank you so much. There's a question by JJ. We're coming to the end of the session already. So JJ, by the way, shout out to JJ. He's the one who set this up. He said, you write a lot. What do you hope to achieve with writing, and how does it help you in your situation? So that's the first question. The second question was, how difficult was it to get your book published?
Yeah, so writing for me was not really a thing in my mind that I become a writer or I always write. But when I was going through difficulties and those emotional times, I just wanted to keep record of those experiences. and one of the ways that I took was writing. And writing was not like very much of a structured writing, because I never learned it that way, but I was just taking notes in somewheres, sometimes in my mobile phone notes, Telegram, or on some notebooks that I had. And then they were coming from the experiences. We have been seeing and feeling a lot of things. Sometimes, I mean, I have been self-censoring myself throughout the time, always, and I was sometimes afraid if I write, if I want to keep those all notes with me. But
Why
anyways,
is that?
after some time,
Why were you self-censoring?
uh, I think it's simple, because I'm still living in Indonesia as a refugee. So the treatment I may receive from any situation, and I be over complaining about it,
Right,
it's not on the
right,
favor of
right.
many people. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
have experience of detention and prison. You can't imagine what traumas
yeah.
are still with me. So when I was thinking that, well, on the other hand, as you said at the beginning, Professor Walid, that many people don't know about refugees, don't know about war, don't know about Afghanistan, don't know about migration, don't know about the journey that I've come through. And I was like, well, that can be interesting. Then I started to write them, and I started to photograph or videograph them. So I have also published some short documentaries and films
Oh,
after some time that I could get the chance to release them and publish them. One or two of them are on YouTube, but then they are very much of good ones. If some of you are wondering that when I was talking about those children studying, learning in detention center, we made a video and it's on YouTube. It's called "Waiting for a Hope." If you search it, you may see and you get the time to watch it. But then for the book itself, with the help of my Indonesian mentor, I'm very much grateful to the author. And she said that you are writing very well, Ali. Why don't you think of letting others read your writing? And that was the time we were more thinking about it. Okay, is that possible? Let's do it. By publishing my book is not published by any publishing company, but it is published as self-published by my Indonesian mentor under her name. But also I've self-censored a lot of those, but I'm sure you have read it, Professor Walid, and if some of our friends are here. So those writings were for the purpose of letting other people such a life exists. And then also, because I believe if people know about it, we people are good to one another. So it doesn't always have to be a very good
yeah,
system to be supporting existence of people. But
indeed.
then people themselves can be opening their heart, their
Yeah.
mind, and then their homes to welcome people. And that was my main and only purpose. But how difficult was publishing the book? I said it's a self-published book. Now I am in the process of writing my second book, and my biggest challenge is I have been receiving offers from publishing companies to publish it, but I have been sharing it with the system, and the system is not really supportive. So it's a huge risk for me to publish it
Oh, really? Oh,
by the company. It's only because they are claiming that you as refugee are not allowed to make a contract or deal with a profit company that is publishing your book. So, and the other part is that the publishing company may not agree for me to self-censor my writing. So, and it's a huge risk when I'm writing about, I'm going to write about, let's say, my human trafficking experience, the smugglers, the detention time, the life of other refugees, the provision of services to refugees in places that I had experience of living. So all of them have always been questioned, can the system become better? And if that is my main question in my mind, imagine how would that be in my writings. So
indeed,
it's
indeed.
a huge thing.
I really hope that that project succeeds. I look forward to it. And once it's published, you can come back on and we can discuss the book as well. So there was a question by Shanas. How do we watch these documentaries, I just checked on YouTube, and it's available, right? So it's under UNHCR Indonesia. That's the one. That's yours, right? That's the
Uh,
one you did.
yeah, that is
Yeah,
one of
yeah, one of
them.
them.
Yeah, there are a few
Yeah,
more, but
yeah.
some of my other works are only privately published in festivals, other places, or they're not on internet.
Okay. Thank you. So Arun said thank you for allowing us to learn through you, and he also asked, "What is your connection with your heritage? Are you still do you practice certain cultural practices, uh, the Hazaras, or I guess you're still a Shia, so that the religious element is there, but ethnically and culturally, do you have a connection with your heritage?"
Honestly, not really.
Yeah.
For people who have separated from their families, it's been a very difficult time, especially when it comes to those celebrations of New Year, Eid, family times, or other things culturally. Yeah, there are refugee communities who are coming from the same background as mine. That is the only possible way that we can connect and keep the heritage. So it's like it's very difficult to maintain, and that is very difficult for people in diaspora to kind of keep themselves always connected to their culture, which we have always been struggling. And imagine if the living setting is in a way that is not really giving you the full freedom and the full support to practice.
I have to be honest with you, Ali. It has been quite a depressing episode. Just and you know the Malay saying, right? As difficult as it is for the eyes to see, it is more difficult for the shoulders to bear. So obviously, I mean, the depression I feel is nothing compared to what you have gone through, right? So, final question, I suppose. Well, that's one from Arvana. Um, why do you think it's important to integrate with a transit country in Indonesia since you'll get resettlement to the third country?
That is a very good question. Well, integration simply does not have to be a thing for people to consider. It happens, but it happens if the ground is laid for people to integrate. People are coming from very different culture, very different of rising and different things. If people are still on the move and going to another country, integration should be a must. People living in a country, so to be called transit for 10 years, it's
Yeah,
1/5 of someone's
yeah,
life, yeah, if
yeah,
someone
yeah.
is living.
10 years,
How
you
many
can't
years?
say it's a
So it's,
transit. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Even the wording
So
itself is wrong already. Yeah.
exactly. So, but I suppose integration is very much crucial. People going back to their countries, if their countries become safe. Some people say Syria is now safe. I doubt it. But if such a situation happens for people to go back to their countries after 10 years of transit, are they now ready to enter a society that they have to contribute
Yeah.
to after 10 years? Or if they are going to a third country, a new country, are they ready to integrate there? Integration doesn't happen overnight, yeah?
Yeah.
It is a practice to be done throughout the time. So I suppose it's very crucial and it's very important, and I very much hope for so-called transit countries in Southeast Asia, like Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and many more. They open up some spaces for refugees and for refugee support and for refugees integration, even if they are not signatory to the Refugee Convention,
Yeah.
even if they do not have a priority for refugees in their countries. But then let them have this space is more important,
Yeah.
yeah?
Agreed. Thank you. So, what are the ways? Let's end off on this. What are some of the ways do you think that Singaporeans, which obviously Singapore doesn't have refugees, how could Singaporeans or other people, ordinary people, help refugees? How could we do that?
I think it's about opening up to when we talk specific about refugees, understanding refugees situation will need some time. So sometimes we have to be like honest to ourselves that if people are coming from other countries and if they are refugees, so I should know them first. And for that to happen, we should open up a little bit so refugees feel safe and welcome. And people like me would love to come and share our stories. You said it's quite depressing. It is very much depressing for all of us to speak about it. But we are only doing it because people need to hear it. Once you know my story, once I know your story, and we are living in the same community and society, I mean, we can be living with understanding each other better. So that is the first step. After we get to know each other, a lot of good things can come. So we always think about, okay, we as humans, refugees, and you as human citizens. Refugee is only an experience happening to people.
Right.
It happened to me. It may happen to anyone else.
Right.
So it is a status given because of that experience. And if we are experiencing something, we are no different than others, and the others are not no different than us. So taking those status with us, refugee or citizen, we can be living together good. And for people who are not hosting refugees in their countries like Singapore, they can be still reaching out to people in other countries for getting to know them, for listening to their stories and see, based on those stories, what is their capability. If they are, I said previously, our schools are tents, our schools are places that we peer educate each other. If you are someone with a specific expertise and you have the time, volunteer with refugees and try to learn with them. It's not about, it has to be very systematic so people get formal permission to go to school, then they have the right to education. No, education can be done everywhere. And now that we are living in a time that everything is online, a lot of good initiations can come out of it. Volunteer with refugees, be friends with refugees, support refugees. No, that can come in any ways. There are refugee-led organizations. There are schools run by refugees. There are situations where refugees are responding to crises that happen to refugees themselves. So you can reach out to them and you can always support them. And there are organizations that are helping refugees who are not refugees themselves. There are very good organizations in Singapore, like High Story, the one that made possible this talk to happen. You can support these organizations. They are supporting refugees. There are also bigger organizations that are working for refugees and supporting. You can always reach out to them how you can be supportive too. It's always about people in difficult times need support, and this support can be done through any means.
Thank you so much. Would you ever want to go back? Ali? Oops.
I missed your voice for a moment.
Would you ever want to go back?
To my country?
Yeah.
I would love to. I would love to. Who doesn't? I would love to go back to my country and live in peace and just bring back those childhood memory that I still have with me and experience living them once more. But that can only happen when it's safe for me, for people like me. So I hope for one day I can.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Ali. It has been an absolute pleasure. So hopefully those who are listening to this can do our part to spread stories like yourself, your own story, but other people's stories as well. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.